I hope you had a nice lunch. I think we're doing quite well on time today. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I think we've seen and heard already some really interesting examples of the kind of environmental responses coming from the sector, from making changes to buildings and making them more sustainable in terms of their energy source, to using collections to engage with people on environmental issues and to engaging with community. We've also had some very big and important questions raised around how do we get from understanding to action, the role of museums in making these global environmental issues local and relevant, and a big question around our culture of stuff and what that means for the sector. And we see within the museums organisations that we work with, that we support, a really exciting growing movement, environmental movement, and a coming together of practical action, engagement, community engagement, and really a more holistic approach to environmental sustainability. And I think that this is really something that we are excited about, but we also see there is potential to do so much more, and particularly joining up the dots between the operational and the curatorial side of what museums do and linking into community and community engagement. And this is the context really for the museum's environmental framework, which is coming out today. You received some short information about it yesterday to give you a sense of what it is. And we have really developed this framework to build on what is happening, but also to inspire further action. And the framework's key aims is to support museums in developing their environmental practice and to inspire museums to use their unique role in fostering environmental understanding action and action with visitors, audiences and communities, and really speaking to what is unique and so important about the museum sector, the stewardship role and the role within the community. So the framework builds on what we are seeing, what is emerging environmental practice and what does leadership look like in the museum sector, but also drawing from what's happening in the broader sector. We have developed it with the support of Arts Council England. And what's been really great about this work as well is the involvement and consultation with museum sector representatives. And we've had fantastic inputs and support from the Museums Development Network, Museums Gallery Scotland, Northern Ireland Museums Council, Wales, this is the Museums, Archives and Library Division in the Welsh Government, Happy Museum, and Sustainable Exhibitions for Museums. And I think this has really helped to develop a resource which can really speak to the sector and what are the specific issues that you are faced with. So what is it? Museums Environmental Framework. It's not. It's a little bit mysterious. Basically, what we have done is looking at what's happening in the sector and the good and practice and emerging leadership is to see, well, what does an environmentally sustainable museum look like? Why is it important? Who is it important to? And what does it look like? And around these emerging key themes of what practice, what areas of practice we're seeing, we've developed this framework which covers a number of key themes and looks at different levels of practice within those themes. We have a fantastic range of examples to illustrate the kind of action which has been taken in these areas. And we've also developed an overview of what is being asked of the sector environmentally. And finally, the key element of the framework is support. What networks, what tools, what resources are out there to help the sector develop its approach, but also to share what networks are there to share best practice. In terms of the key themes that we have identified and we're seeing through experience and the organizations that we're working with, the 12 key themes are around values and mission, governance and management, commitment to action, understanding your impacts, and also engaging and communicating both internally and externally about what a museum is doing to be more environmentally sustainable. Visitor and audience engagement is obviously a massive topic and something which has been discussed a lot already today. In the more practical areas, what does it look like in terms of buildings and sites and spaces? What is the emerging practice in terms of collections and exhibitions? Embedding environmental thinking and decision-making in commercial services, embedding it in financial decision-making, investment and fundraising activities, also something that's been touched on earlier this morning. And the final key theme is around collaborations and partnerships, and we've seen some very interesting examples, and we'll see some more in the course of this afternoon. So basically the framework just gives an overview within these key areas of what does it look like if you're maybe just starting out, or if you're really innovating and demonstrating leadership. It's not meant to be a detailed guide. It's really meant to allow the user to look at it and go, okay, in this area, I'm just starting out, but actually in this area, I'm doing really well. And it's just the idea of showing what leadership looks like, understanding where you're at, and thinking and informing how you can go forward. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through the whole content of the framework. This is an example of, in the area of understanding, Tony mentioned this morning the concept of measuring what matters environmentally. What levels of practice are there here? You might be just starting out, you have an idea of a few impacts, or you might actually have a really rounded approach and go so far as understanding what the risks are in terms of, for example, flood risks and biodiversity. In growing number of museums are now looking at biodiversity, those which have green spaces and sites. And actually just looking at environmental impacts, which is a very negative term, or environmental performance, which is a more positive one, and looking at that as a core indicator of organizational health and resilience, and having it really embedded. So that's the basic approach, again, across those 12 key themes, looking at, well, what are the various levels of practice? Obviously, practice is evolving and changing, but we feel that this is really a good reflection of what we are seeing across the sector. So one really important thing that we have, and we've already been seeing today, is examples of what environmental practice is happening within the sector. And we've brought together some short examples within the framework that speak to the different areas, whether it's governance, whether it's public engagement, whether it's collections and exhibitions. And we have a really nice range from across the country and different shapes and sizes of organizations. We've also included a few international examples in there. There's some very exciting developments happening. We have the Climate Museum in New York, which doesn't yet have a physical space, but it's really dedicated to, it's a museum about climate change and engaging people in that issue. Biotopia in Munich, the Museum of Life, which is, again, really dedicated to the issues of nature and the environment and what it means for us and for us as humans. The California Academy of Science is a really interesting example of an organization that's been leading the way. They are the first major museum to commit to divesting from fossil fuel funding. They are committed to becoming zero carbon by 2025, which goes beyond what is required under the Paris Agreement. And they're also about to launch in the start of next year a program called Planet 2020, which aims to bring solutions around energy, water, and food to 200 million museum visitors. So I think that's a really good example of leadership and international examples that are also of relevance to us here. I'm not going to go through all of the examples. There's a lot of very interesting snapshots of what different museums have been doing, but I have picked out a few highlights. It was difficult. This example here is from Leeds Museums and Galleries, really about how they've been addressing issues of environmental concern through community engagement programs. At Temple Newsome, for example, they've been working with local people on issues of fuel poverty, looking at energy use, how to use less of it, changing providers, understanding tariffs, and in a way that will support people on low incomes. At the Industrial Museum at Armley Mills, they've developed a gardening project which is promoting gardening as a way of tackling mental health issues, but also engaging people to improve and develop the green space which is available to the local community. This is an example from Northern Ireland and a partnership between National Museums Northern Ireland and CEDAR, which is the Centre for Environmental Data and Recording. And together they developed a biodiversity training course, and they've done 64 training courses, and they've trained 850 people already, which is pretty impressive. And Northern Ireland is not exactly a huge area as well. And they've trained people, local naturalists, environmentalists, and conservationists in particular. And really, the program was about building capacity within the local communities to be a part of understanding nature, what it means, but also recording it and having good information about biodiversity, which, as we know, is incredibly important because we're losing quite a lot of it. Tyne and Weir Archives and Museums, as an individual organisation, has been doing fantastic work across the more practical and operational areas, but also looking at environmental issues in learning and outreach activities. There's an example here from the Discovery Museum, their play and event program, which was about skill sharing, design and construction, but which was very much focused on reusable and recyclable materials. And as a sector service support organisation, TWAM, as they're known also, developed a program to support museums in the Northeast called Make Carbon History. And they worked with 15 local museums and achieved an 18% carbon reduction and saved £56,000. Sorry, I've just noticed that I'm about to run out of power. Is Paul around? I'll keep going. Oops. Another great example from the Whitworth, we have Nicola Walker with us today, who will be leading one of the discussion groups. And the Whitworth has a really rounded approach, which you can very nicely see on the sustainability site pages of their website. And it's, I think, rare that museums and galleries have such fantastic information communicated externally. It's a really gives a very nice overview of their approach across buildings, across engagements, and collections, programming, learning, and outreach. Sorry. And I will give you the picture, which shows what is on their websites. The one particularly good example from the Whitworth is that they have adopted a very passive approach to environmental conditioning, and their building is actually now naturally cooled, which is very rare for such a building. And they have, I think, developed quite a brave approach, actually, to trying much wider parameters for temperature and relative humidity. So that's just a few of the examples which I think show the different range of areas and topics, environmental topics, which are being covered within the sector. Very briefly, within the framework, so we have this overview of the different levels of practice. We have examples which speak to those key themes. We've also included in there a summary of requirements, but really looking at what are museums being asked, required to do in terms of environmental performance and environmental impacts. And this is covering issues from legislation, such as having a display energy certificate, which David mentioned earlier, which they have for MSHED, to the accreditation standard for museums and its requirement around having environmental policies. And I think really just it summarizes what's being asked, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through standards, whether it's through funding requirements. And really what we see is, in general, museums are being asked to do some level of environmental reporting and have some environmental policies and plans. I've just given an example here also from legislation in Wales and Scotland, which is really quite innovative, in particular in Wales, the well-being for future generations, where the larger museums, the public bodies, have quite a lot of requirements on them around sustainability. So that's the third key element of the framework. And is that gone? And the last bit of the framework is really just an overview of the tools, guidance, resources, and networks which are out there to help the sector. We've got some networks like Sustainable Exhibitions for Museums. Interestingly, the National Trust has developed a really good series of guides around building design and green energy, which they share with the sector. And Museums Northwest Development Programme has worked with Arup, for example, to develop tools for around U values. Very exciting, but really about understanding heat loss issues in museums buildings, how to measure them and what to do about them. So there is some really good and useful information and support out there. And the framework is available, the full framework is available on our website today, with all of those examples, with that overview of what you can do. And we really very much hope that you will be able to use it to see where you sit within that, to think about what you could be doing, and to look at the inspiring examples of what other museums are doing in the sector. So that was just to give you a flavour and a taste, so you can all go now and eagerly download it from our website. I'd just like to ask if anybody has any questions about the framework, if there's anything they'd like to know or to ask. No? Okay, thank you. So we are just going to hopefully have some more beautiful images from our next speakers. So we're just going to change to another laptop. So we've got this next section, which is really to look more in depth at different responses from organizations. And we've got three speakers. We've got Kevin Ward, who's Museum Development Manager from Museums in the Park. We've got Museum in the Park, sorry. We've got Anna Brennan, who's CEO of Ironbridge Gorge Trust Museum. And we have Laura Coleman, who is founder and chair of Onca in Brighton. Just bear with us for a sec. Ironbridge Gorge Trust Museums. Apologies for the technological issues.
Yay, hopefully, hopefully it'll be worth the wait. Right. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to rattle through an eclectic mix, really, of what we do over at Ironbridge. I thought I'd start with quite a seasonal picture and probably a complete contrast to this famous painting of the Industrial Revolution. Some of you have heard me talk before, and I think probably more than anything, this painting, which hangs in the Science Museum in London, depicts why Ironbridge is not only the birthplace of industry, but sadly the birthplace of global warming. It all kind of started with us in the systematic burning of fossil fuel. But since then, as an organisation, we've done a lot to kind of start repaying that debt back anyway. The Ironbridge Gorge now is a very green and beautiful place. We were one of the UK's first World Heritage Sites, designated back in 1986. And we've got a collective aim with the other partners to the World Heritage Site of being the most sustainable inhabited World Heritage Site in the world. Whether we'll ever get there, I'm not sure, but we're doing quite a lot with a wide range of partners. This picture that's up on the screen is of Coalport China Museum, and as you can see, much of the gorge is heavily wooded, and within there there's a huge range of rare and fauna and flora, including otters, kingfishers, many hectares of ancient woodland, and a recent book that's just come out that was actually done on a Lady Park Wood in Monmouthshire, really shows that managed woodland has a far higher biodiversity than if you just leave it to slowly fall into decay. And much of the woodland within the gorge is managed by a partner organisation, the Severn Gorge Countryside Trust, but the Museum Trust, we also own about 100 hectares of scheduled ancient woodland as well as our museum sites. The World Heritage Site is pinned on two key monuments. The first is the old furnace at Corbett, Dell, and it's here back in 1709 that Abraham Darby first smelted iron with coke, and that really paved the way for the Industrial Revolution. And it also arguably started mass consumerism as well, because for the first time people could actually pick something they wanted, which later developed into catalogues and really changed the way people lived and still impacts on the way that we live today. The other symbol that the World Heritage Site is pinned on is, of course, the Iron Bridge, which I started my presentation on. It was built as a symbol of the power of the Corbett Dell company and the new wonder material of iron as a new raw material and a new building material. But as an organisation, we've got 10 museum sites. We were established back in 1967, so we're 50 years old this year. We manage and look after 36 scheduled monuments and listed buildings within the World Heritage Site. And we have about 500,000 visitors a year to our paid sites. And within that, there's about 70,000 school visits. apart from our Arts Council MPM funding, we don't receive any statutory funding from central or local government, so we're a very large independent museum. As well as our 10 museums, as I said, we own a lot of woodland, but we also own 2 Quaker burial grounds, an arboretum. We've got 7 shops, housing. So we're quite a diverse organisation in the assets that we manage and look after. And we've got about 230 staff at the height of our season, and we work with over 500 active volunteers. Education is at the heart of what we do. The Victorians were the best recyclers of them all, whether that's from rag rugging or using old newspapers as bricks, and probably in today's age less desirable uses of animal fat for candles and things like that. But we demonstrate that past way of life still, and but make it relevant and applicable for a modern audience. The photographs up on the screen are some of the children dressed for Victorian school lessons, as well as more scary things from my perspective of building gliders out of recycled materials and seeing which one would fly the furthest. The picture in the top right is of our Fab Lab, and we use a lot of recycled material in that. All our 3D printers use cornstarch as the means that they actually make the models out of, rather than any kind of plastics. But we're also about heritage conservation. This quite alarming picture was only in 2005 of one of our main sites down at Jackfield. Over the last 20 years, we've invested about £30 million in the World Heritage Site in our assets to bring them back to viable economic use. And pleasingly now, Jackfield's very different. It's a really thriving centre for creative industries. And so we've repurposed some of the site is still a museum, but we have a number of tenants on site that make tiles today. Some of them are ceramicists, glass artists, etc. to really bring a new life to what was once a ruined site. But we're very active in our environmental work. Our environmental policies are displayed at front of house very prominently in all our sites. We've, for a number of years now, held the Gold Green Business Tourism Scheme Award. Most recently, we got that in 2016. And we're one of the biggest sites, multi-sites, that hold that award from them. I'd highly recommend it to any of you. It provides a great framework, and it took us a long time to get the Gold Award. We thought we'd never get there at one point, partly because of the listed buildings make any intervention quite difficult, so we had to be quite innovative in the way that we did things. Tourism is a key driver for us, as it has always been within the gorge. This painting, the figures in the bottom right-hand corner, are really the tourists of the day, looking at the spectacle of the ironworks back in the 18th century. The big black smoke in the middle there is the old furnace, depicted from the top of one of the hills in the gorge. And tourism is still a key driver for us, but we need to make sure that it's as sustainable as possible, and the messaging we give out to our visitors is really crucial in that. The Sabbath walks, you probably can't really see the white writing on this screen very well, but even back, in the 18th century, the great ironmasters were all about health and well-being for their workforce. They might have had slightly different reasons that we might have than today, but Richard Reynolds created workers' walks, or the Sabbath walks, which allowed his workforce, they got one day off a week, and he created a series of parkland walks through the gorge so that they could spend time with their family. Probably most likely it was to keep them out of the pub, because they were all Quakers, they didn't really believe in alcohol. But we're doing some research at the moment, because we believe it is probably one of the first public parks, because back at that time, whilst there were great estates, they were for the landed gentry, they weren't for the common man. And so we believe that this may be one of the first parks where it was built entirely for the workforce of the ironworks. We do a huge amount of recycling, as I'm sure many of you do. Within Ingenuity, our Design and Technology Centre, we have Chuck the Eco Duck. He's a little cartoon character, and him and his farmyard friends for the preschool and sort of under fives. And his whole life is spent recycling. So it's a series of cartoons that we've developed in partnership with another organisation. They're updated regularly. We have community skips, so all our neighbours can use them as opposed to just ourselves. We recycle just about everything. I mean, as many of you we've heard earlier, you know, museums are great hoarders, and there really is nothing, it seems, that we ever throw away. We reuse a lot of stuff. All our cleaning products are ethically sourced, and one of our exhibits in Ingenuity is all about recycling, and it shows in a fun, interactive way how children can learn about recycling. We're the flagship fair trade organisation for Telford and Wrekin, as well as for Shropshire, and we actively take part in Fair Trade Fortnight. Our mayor welcomed, we had one of the fair trade suppliers. She came over from Costa Rica. She's a coffee grower over there, and we had her with us for a few days during Fair Trade Fortnight. We also, though, are not all about looking at the past. So some of our contemporary exhibitions, we recently, as part of a wider contemporary programme, commissioned David Nash to create a new sculpture that sits right outside the old furnace. It's made of charred oak, and it sits on a bed of coal. He was hugely inspired by the landscape at Corbett, Dell. And again, it's just a way of engaging with our audience about the changes that happened 300 years ago and their relevance and pertinence today. We also have a lot of wildlife initiatives within the gorge. We're very lucky. We live in a really and work in a really beautiful environment. We've got our own beehives on site. We sell our own honey. We've got grass snakes, really rare wildflowers and butterflies. You probably can't really see it very well, but the picture in the bottom right is sadly a kingfisher hit one of our windows, and our staff rescued it and took it to the RSPCA, and then had the pleasure of releasing it back into the wild. It was completely unharmed. But again, we have trails and activities for older and younger people to get involved with as part of that. And our ranger is really key to managing that natural landscape. We work a lot with the community and with other partner organisations, particularly the Wildlife Trust. Some of the big industrial companies within Telford are part of a business environmental support scheme, BEST it's called. And through them, they've done a lot of landscape management work with us, as well as some funner things like wildlife camera trappings. And we've seen polecats and badgers and otters just randomly come across our camera within our woodland and landscape, particularly at Bliss Hill. But we've also worked with our own staff and our volunteers, really simple things like switch it off campaigns. Our energy bill is over £300,000 a year, so anything that we can do to reduce that helps us financially, as well as obviously the environmental impact. Low flush toilets, we've now changed over, so about 90% of our total lighting is low energy. And we try and grow a lot of stuff on site where we can. So these are polytunnels that a group of corporate volunteers worked with us and built. We do work with a lot of corporate groups, and environmental projects are really great for them. It's what they're looking for. And I appreciate that we're really lucky because we've got a lot of outside space, but they also help us with environmental projects inside as well. The main picture is a group of Capgemini volunteers who have a long-standing relationship with us. Sadly, they had some people from another office, and they all came dressed in their work suits ready to work outside. But they managed it. They were pretty filthy by the end of the day. But they did a long-term programme working with some of our collections and better cataloguing and stacking it all outside. And as I mentioned, we can't do things on our own. Our independence is brilliant, but working in partnership gives us far more traction and gets our message out far wider. So we do work with a wide range of partners. Ironbridge has a well-known walking festival, and we actively support that, as well as through the Wildlife Trust, some of the big manufacturers that are based in and around our local area, as well as the YHA. We own 2 youth hostels within the gorge and run them in partnership with the YHA, and much of their work is around environmental sustainability and the outdoors. So my time's up, so I'll leave you with a nice picture of the Ironbridge lit up for the Community World Heritage Festival that the Trust has a contract for services to put on. And at the moment, the bridge is undergoing a major conservation project, so sadly it's wrapped in tarpaulin for the next 12 months, so you'll have to just look at that picture instead. So thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Kevin, would you like to come up, please? I'm just going to open your file if you can.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Ward. I'm the manager of the museum in the park in Stroud in Gloucestershire, and I'm just going to give you some insight into the environmental practices at the museum in the park. Firstly, we're a museum service. We're provided through a partnership between Stroud District Council and the Stroud District Cow Museum Trust. So the council provide the service, the buildings, the infrastructure, the staff, and the trust make the collections available to the museum. We tell the story of the Stroud District and the people that have been there, past and present, alongside a temporary exhibition gallery, which enables us to host exhibitions that might be able to cover different topics or subjects that our collections might not, and often we try to find connections between them. We receive about 55,000 visitors a year, and as you may have guessed, we are located in a park. There we are. So the park itself is located next to Stroud Town, which in itself is located within the gorgeous Five Valleys, and is very much part of the industrial Cotswolds. Now, being part of Stroud District Council and Stroud District itself and the Stroud area, it's a very green area, has a strong reputation for environmental credentials. In fact, in December 2015, the local authority was the first carbon neutral authority in the country. And in 1996, it was one of the few local authorities to join an EU-driven programme called the Eco Management and Audit Scheme, and it still continues to subscribe to that to this day. This is a voluntary environmental management instrument that enables organisations to assess, manage and continuously improve their environmental performance. So, of course, we are part of that. And the council has a very strong pedigree in terms of environmental sustainability. And we get support through things like EMAS and things like that. However, on the other hand, one of the challenges for our business as a museum is that we're very different from most other areas of the local authority. So whilst that support is there, there are obviously some strong business cases that have to be made. There is the mansion in its older day. I thought the most useful thing was to put up a floor plan of the museum, just to try and illustrate some of the challenges that we faced. So back in 2008, we tried to get together an idea of what are our environmental challenges in terms of the building. The building is heated, obviously, through a building management system with a number of radiators throughout the museum that are controlled with thermostatic radiator valves. Hot water's pumped around there to heat the building, etc., etc. However, people like to tamper with those radiator valves, so everything is too cold, too hot, and there was a lot of movement in those. The building management itself, the system itself, was very bespoke. It was very difficult to understand and had very limited interface. The display lighting, the museum was equipped with lots of low voltage tungsten halogen spotlights, for example, which were producing between 7 and 14 kilowatts of heat every hour. The fire doors, so we used to shut all of the fire doors at night in the mansion, the building on my left. And that meant that the extract system that's in the museum couldn't pull the air out of the building at night because there are no extract fans in the corridor areas. So we were opening the museum in the summer with starting temperatures of around the high 20s. And Another additional problem is that the foyer, the new extension, which is the other part of the building, has a very high ceiling and has really inadequate heating. And most of the air that's drawn into the mansion to maintain relative humidity is drawn through that foyer. So what we decided to do was commission heritage environmental consultants to carry out a study and come up with some really practical and affordable recommendations to address our issues. We'd had many other surveys before that point, but none of them really took into account the situation that we found ourselves in with the collections and the listed building. It was also very clear that it wasn't going to be one person's responsibility to address our environmental sustainability. So we formed something called MEET, which was the Museum Environment Action Team, and that included staff from collections to front of house, to our council's health and safety officer and the council's building officer. And that was to try and tackle a number of these issues. If I focus very quickly on lighting, the council rolled out a corporate project to replace all of the office lighting in 2010. We actually took the option to leave the light switches on the wall because I was really keen on making sure that people didn't forget how to turn things off. Any other further lighting project, though, was going to require additional justification and business case for them. In many other areas, the council don't have spotlights like we do. They don't have showcase lighting, etc. We worked with a specialist lighting contractor to develop a business case, but in particular to demonstrate the return on investment. And I think someone remarked earlier about the need, sometimes particularly within local authorities, to get a return on investment within 4 to 5 years. We had 296 50-watt halogen spotlights, which were producing that heat I mentioned earlier. But our other challenge was that the lighting in some areas was also acting as our visitor comfort lighting. So we borrowed a couple of units from the contractor to do a trial. We then rolled that out to a few more rooms. That worked very well. And then we managed to make the business case for the investment at the time, what was called the green energy funding within the local authority, to replace all of our spotlights throughout the museum on a ratio of 1 to 1.6, if anyone's interested. That was back in 2012. However, what we couldn't justify in terms of developing a sound business case for it, in terms of return on investment, was the showcase lighting. However, eventually, in 2016, we were successful in applying for a grant with the South West Museums Development Programme's Small Scale Capital Grant Programme to retrospectively replace all the showcase lighting that was installed as part of the Museum in the Park project back in 2000. So we worked with a lighting specialist to scope this and also develop a plan of implementation, as it involved, as you'd probably expect, decanting every single display case to enable that work to take place. So whilst this enables us to meet better the criteria for loans from national and regional museums, it also uses less energy, provides a more consistent light, and requires, of course, less maintenance. And this year we are completing the replacement of any recess spots with LEDs throughout the rest of the museum. So this project has taken 9 years, but we didn't lose sight of the fact that we wanted to replace all of the lighting in the museum. We got there eventually. Not going to bore you with charts. The point of this putting this up is about the importance of sharing your data with the rest of your museum team. Let them know what difference things are making to your business. And as you can see from there, our energy consumption has been in decline. Other things we did to improve the environment, well, we just left those doors open at night. We didn't bother locking them all at night, which is what we were doing. This also, as it was pointed out to us, would make access easier for the emergency services in the event of a fire, rather than having to smash every door down to get through the building. So it allowed ventilation to those hallways, so a very practical solution. We managed to get some internal funding to upgrade our building management system, so it's now much more intuitive. We've involved the duty managers in how to use that system, so they can interface with it on, particularly on weekends. We improved the installation in the loft space of the mansion. But in particular, we engaged the rest of the team, particularly around front of house, around the principles of the building management system. Every time we made a change to things, we explained that to the team, what we were trying to find out and why. So it was a whole team effort. Can't quite see it in this slide, but there are destratification fans that have been mounted in the foyer to help push the warm air down in that large ceilinged building. The heating for that building comes in at the ceiling height. It was often remarked to me that it would be a great building if it was turned upside down. And on various occasions, we have looked at heating the foyer, but with 2 exit doors that create a thoroughfare, you always be fighting against those. So as soon as you open those doors, all that hot air just rushes out or sits up high in the ceiling. So what we've actually done is decided to just focus on the importance of keeping our staff comfortable on the front desk. Many of our visitors that come during the autumn and winter months or cold months, they're coming in with their coats and everything, so they're okay. So we decided to focus on our staff. Some other things we've done in that picture there is our new shop that's just recently launched, again thanks to a grant from the South West Museums Development Programme. And as part of that, we offered our old fittings to other museums and local charities who were able to take them away and use them in their shops, rather than us just throwing them away. Our shop also now can stock more local products by local artists and makers, and also ethical products in our cafe. I'm just going to skip across a few slides because I want to talk about our walled garden in particular. Obviously, we undertake recycling, composting, rainwater harvesting, based in a park. So one of the things we've decided to do is we introduce bird feed, so people can come and buy bird feed at the museum rather than feeding bread to the ducks, which isn't very good for them or the environment. We also undertake bird walks and tree walks and regular, gentle, dementia-friendly walks, all starting from the park. Go on to the walled garden. So adjoining the garden is a listed walled garden that has been derelict for 20 years. And with the Friends of the Museum, we launched a project to bring it back in life. We started that project with funding from Arts Council England by working with a local charity, Stroud Valleys Project, who specialise in working outdoors with volunteers and engagement. This opened last year, and this is the view of the garden, which features a new high-quality learning building there on your right, which is low form, south-facing, finally got some solar. We haven't been able to justify the business case for solar anywhere else because of the tree coverage in the park, primarily. Automatic windows and louvres to help manage the environment within that building. We also reuse material that was found on site. So the top terrace in front of that building has reused the flagstones that were found in the walled garden during our work. It's also given us the opportunity to extend our public programme, so undertaking workshops such as bug hunts, photography, workshops using the garden, and also working with the artistic community to present new perspectives on the relationship with the outdoors, both past and present. And like the museum, we want the garden to act as a catalyst to go out and explore the wider world. We had a colony of caterpillars of the Cinnabar Moth, which the lepidopterist, the park supervisor, got very excited about and decided to take a colony of caterpillars out into the park to re-establish them within the park because they had been in decline. We have an orchard in the garden which is stocked with local varieties, Gloucestershire varieties of apple and pear trees. And this year we were able to join in with the National Meadows Day with the Cotswold Conservation Board's Magnificent Meadows team. So it's something that we wouldn't have been able to do before. Oh, sorry. We've taken on new hosts in the garden. So we also have a bee colony working with the local bee club to run Saturday bee workshops. We are now a home to some hedgehogs. And the volunteers who help us look after the garden have put up a number of bird boxes throughout the garden as well. We've also used the project to supply kindling as well, which has been a very welcomed resource with some of our visitors and very, very popular. And finally, this is a home that our volunteers made for some toads that they found within the garden. The key thing for us has been to be working together as one team, have a plan, and stick to it, even if it does take a considerable number of years to eventually get there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Laura, if you'd like to come up, thank you.
Hi. Should I just start? Yeah. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for asking me. I'm from Onca, which is a gallery, not a museum, in Brighton. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the practical ways of ethical working and being within the cultural sector. So, this is not Onca. We're an arts charity. Yes. Okay, cool. Cool. This is Onca. So we're an arts charity supporting the well-being of people and places by increasing awareness of and engagement with environmental and social challenges. We try to open up our venue for artists and communities to ask big questions about difficult issues. Onca has been going for 5 years, about now. It started when I came back to Brighton after working for a number of years on environmental conservation projects abroad. And I was desperate to find new ways of telling the stories that seemed, to me, so urgent. Stories about deforestation, illegal hunting, forest fires, palm oil, and, of course, climate change. I found some truly incredible art projects, but no art and performance venues. No spaces that were dealing with these topics on a permanent basis, that acted as community hubs for artists and the general public struggling to come to terms with these questions. So, Onca came into being. We run and host an ongoing series of exhibitions, projects. So we run and host an ongoing series of exhibitions, projects, and outreach, looking at topics that span the future of education, biodiversity, gaming, happiness, homelessness, grief, and remembrance. We focus particularly on collaborative work, looking at how to engage new, diverse audiences through play, craft, and inquiry. One of the major barriers to engagement with environmental questions is the business as usual mentality, a looking away rather than a looking at. So for us, over the years, we've come to see Onca as a framing device, as the four corners of a space that is open to anyone who wants to creatively engage with and talk about and question our relationship with the changing planet. However, without an ethical backbone to our work, whether financially, structurally, or creatively, we wouldn't feel confident addressing the kinds of issues that we do. It feels imperative for anyone wanting to engage with the state of the planet today to also be interrogating the flawed models, the flawed hierarchies, which have, for most of us, shaped our lives. But that kind of interrogation is really, really hard. Part of this, of course, is about money. So this is the oil sponsorship-free website, a project led by, among others, cultural organisations, including Platform, Art Not Oil, BP or Not BP. On the Pleasure's website, almost 100 organisations have signed up and over 300 individuals. I think it's almost at 400 now. The commitment is not to take any oil, coal or gas corporate sponsorship for our cultural work, and to call on our peers and institutional partners to refuse fossil fuel funding too. That's a lot of organisations and people. But the question is, why isn't it more? Many now make the link between climate change and culture. Anthropogenic climate change, it can be said, is culture. And culture is climate. The two are inextricably linked. So if, as cultural organisations and artists, we support climate damaging models, what message are we giving to our audiences? But as I've said, most of our lives are shaped around climate damaging models. So to fight against that is really hard. On a day-to-day basis, what does this mean for organisations and small charities like Onca? The reality is that it's really, really complex. For us, although kind of grand statements and grand actions like signing the pledge are brilliant and inspiring, we, personally and as an organisation, struggle with our environmental policies. They must be constantly interrogated, but that takes time and resources. For an organisation with 4 permanent staff members, it's hard to do the research that's required to be 100% confident in our choices and in our long-term financial stability. We're lucky. At Onca, about 70% of our income comes from our own business activities, such as renting out the gallery or hiring out desk space to a co-working community upstairs. Every person we work with needs to adhere to our environmental and social ethos. But how far should we take it? And if we say a flat no to someone, are we shutting down the potential for dialogue? We had an example a few months ago when a team from an oil company wanted to hire our meeting room. And we had long discussions about what to do. And in the end, we decided to offer it to them for free on the condition that they spent a portion of their time talking about climate justice. They never got back to us, of course. So, this is the website of Platform. And if you don't know Platform, they're an amazing organization. I'd encourage you to go and look them up. So since Onca's foundation, we've looked to Platform's ethical funding policy as a guide and as an inspiration. It's something that we constantly refer to when feeling at sea or disheartened. So I'm just going to read a little of what follows on this page, because I think that they talk about ethical funding guidelines much better than I could. So what they say is that the overall guidelines are simple. We aim to avoid, wherever possible, seeking or taking money from funders who make their income from activity that abuses human rights or causes environmental destruction or depends on the depletion of finite resources. We actively seek to promote economic activity which is based on promoting social justice, safeguarding the environment, and the future of precious resources. These values guide us over the source of finance for our work, as well as the ethical sourcing of materials, services, and goods. Platform believes that this side of the work is as much a part of as making and influencing culture as our project work. It is another strand of political activity and never just about filling the coffers. Good research is essential to establish the values, background source of income, and also the network of any prospective funder. It's important to fully consider the risks of compromise, not only to ourselves, but also to our relationships with our allies, and to scope out the potential for damage to any prospective relationship. Splits over ethics and funding are not uncommon and can have lasting impacts. In-depth research and systemic analysis can help avoid this happening. So, how does this come into practice at Onca? We aren't big enough to have Shell or BP knocking down our door, and there are other ways that I see the pledge trickling down into our everyday practices. Onca recycles. We provide mostly vegan and always vegetarian catering. We brew our own kombucha. We strive for non-hierarchical work and pay structures. We get our energy from good energy. We use recycled paints. We try to limit the use of disposable plastic, both in and outside the gallery as much as possible. We're dialogic in our approach. For example, we open up our Grade 2 listed building, which comes with a whole host of sustainability and accessibility challenges, to architecture and design students, enabling them to use it as a case study to plan for more sustainable building practices. These boxes, though, these individual and collective acts, they're powerful and they're essential, but if I'm honest, for me, they don't feel like they're enough. There's always something extra, something more, something deeper, and our remit is to provide engagement with environmental issues. We want to save the whales or protect the forests, but saving the whales and protecting the forests isn't really about whales and forests, if we're honest. Onca, integrally, is flawed. We're an all-white, predominantly female organisation. We're trying to use art to help sustain life on this planet, all life, and yet we're doing it from a platform of privilege, the kind of privilege that is arguably, and often invisibly, one of the major drivers of climate change. Does this negate what we do? How do we make an honest attempt to decolonize our organisation, our language, and our work? These are our difficult questions that we're asking at Onca every day. All of our projects now are geared in some way towards researching how to do this, including forming an advisory board to help. Can an art space truly promote the well-being of everyone, human and non-human, not just a privileged few? As a result of this kind of questioning, we do a lot of participatory collaborative work, particularly around DIY ritual. Ritual can be a powerful tool. Within a dominant culture, one without the space for reflection and rest, ritual can tap into that deeper thing, the deeper craving to feel both joy and what is arguably just as essential at this time, which is grief. A lot of the DIY rituals that we create at Onca are around extinction. For example, this is a cabaret funeral, let's skip forward, for the thylacine, which was created last year by a performance group called Feral Theatre. Small individual acts are essential, as are collaborative ones, in whatever form they take, whether that's saying no to a sponsor we feel uncomfortable about, or moving through the glitter curtain in a cabaret for Benjamin the Last Thylacine. These acts serve to locate us in the realities of the world today. Our exhibition that opens this week is another exploration of using ritual to acknowledge extinction. It coincides with Remembrance Day for Lost Species, which is the 30th of November. It's the product of a partnership with the Booth Museum of Natural History, and it's a really good example of how we, as a small art gallery, are working with museums and their collections. The exhibition is called Extinct Icons and Ritual Burials. So it shows the work of Katie Toome, aka Mother Eagle. She's a fifth-generation needleworker, and she pays homage to some of the most famous extinct species, persecuted in their lifetime, but revered and worshipped in death, like martyrs. Alongside this, we're displaying junk insects, which are specimens from the Booth Museum. Junk collections are those which lack information and categorization, rendering them deficient. Poets have responded to individuals within the junk, reflecting on the hierarchical tensions embedded within what we choose to honor and what we don't. So this weekend, we also hosted another piece which was dealing with similar kinds of questions. It's a performance piece called The Privileged by Jamel Harewood. He asked his audience, have you ever seen a polar bear in the flesh? Been close enough to notice just how white these magnificent mammals are? Here is your chance to get up close and personal. Remove your shoes, coats, and bags as you're about to encounter the Arctic's whitest predator with black skin. Jamel, in the audience's encounter with a polar bear, manages to also ask questions about race, community, and identity, which are, of course, major drivers towards the polar bear's extinction. By shedding the polar bear's skin, we see how many entangled structural layers there are behind the politics of things like biodiversity loss and climate change. ONCA's part of a group of organisations including Climate Outreach, University of Brighton, and the Bocconi University in Vienna, working on an international research project, exploring the role of social norms, self and group efficacy for mainstreaming climate action among young adults. The heart of this is a 4-day residency in Austria for an international group consisting half of climate activists and half of others who are not deeply engaged. We will be researching how exactly to break apart the multi-layered politics of climate change storytelling. All the participants will be aged between 19 and 30, and amongst other things, they'll be considering what makes messages about climate change engaging or ineffective, and come up with ideas about ways to engage new people and develop new leaders. So, working within the cultural sector and in the business of telling many rather than a meta-narrative about climate change, I'm just going to finish with a quote from the wonderful Donna Haraway, who I'm absolutely obsessed with. And this is from her magical book called Staying with the Trouble. And for me, it embodies the drive to really try to unpack the stories that we tell and the language that we use to tell it. So she says, it matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with. It matters what knots, not knots, and it matters what stories make worlds and what worlds make stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our three speakers for showing us what it is they're doing and how they're doing it in a way which is unique to their organizations, to their place, to their communities. We are going to have a 15-minute coffee break now. And after that, we are going to go into discussion groups where we will have chance to get into some more depth on the different topics which we've looked at this afternoon and this morning. Okay. See you back in 15 minutes. Thank you.